Happy day, YouTube. My name is John, and this is my channel, The Intermancer. The last couple of videos I've made have been live coding examples, and this is going to be another story time video because I've done some things since that last live coding example, but I've made some decisions about how I'm going to go forward from here. I liked the live coding stuff. As I've shared with you, my whole purpose for doing this is to learn how to use AI more effectively. And I have found that thinking out loud and learning how to bring my thoughts forward instead of sitting back staring at the sky and living in my head like I normally do has been very good for my process. So I'm going to keep going with that. My last video, however, was way too long. So after this one, I'm going to start setting a timer when I make my videos. Now this one is going to be story time because I have done some things since the last video and I want to just go through that, talk about my roadmap, and then get to recording the next live coding experience. So, one thing that everyone should know is that every new IDE, or even an old IDE that has been through some changes, or sometimes you don't even have to take them through changes, your tools will often do wacky things, whether you do anything to them or not. And something I was experiencing for a while here in my code is that I noticed I was having a problem where it was saying that the build path was not set correctly. Now this is my first project to ever do in Visual Studio Code. I'm used to IntelliJ or Eclipse, but this is my first time. And I kept noticing that Chromosome Test was telling me it couldn't find java.lang.object, and if you know anything about Java, that means that the Java home was not correctly set. But how do you set it in your IDE? Well, I asked Copilot, and it gave me some useful, helpful things, but some of the advice it gave me was a little bit out of date. But thanks to Copilot and just fiddling around with things, I finally got all of the errors to go away. The details aren't important. The fiddling is what is important, and that can be where Copilot can both be a help and a hindrance. It's a help because it gives you an idea of where to start playing with things, but it can be a hindrance because sometimes it will tell you it knows what you need to do next, and that's just not quite the right thing. Again, I'm not going to go into details. I'm just going to note that is the case of the way these things work. Now, I want to quickly go over the things that I did off camera, and then I'm going to stop this video, start a new one immediately, and go back into live coding. As you know, as I've been sharing, my goal for this whole project is to take a context-first approach. So, one of the things that I changed in my organism domain objects context file is that I changed around the order of things that I declared in my organism repository. If you saw the last video, the really long one that I know from the numbers a lot of you haven't seen, and I can't say that I recommend you go through that, slog through that monster. But as it was seen in that video, I started defining a lot of these organism repository classes and bouncing back and forth between the Copilot AI and doing things in Claude. Eventually I got to here, and the code that I generated and accepted into my project came directly from Claude after I had updated my context document a few times. One of the things I changed was the order in which I declare things. I put this organism not found exception at the very top. because even though these LLMs are kind of, well, not even though, especially because these LLMs are kind of dumb, but they're powerful, so it fools you how they think. It's important that you pay a lot of attention to how you craft your context. And the better your context, the better the code is going to be that your LLM ultimately provides for you. So here, I started with my organism not found exception originally, and if you want to, you can go into GitHub and you can see the history of this file and see the changes that I made. But originally, I had started off with this organism repository that I was declaring just to be an interface. That's all well and good. But I got to this organism not found exception, and I had it declared next because that's the way it originally came from Copilot. But I realized that I want to completely eliminate as much as possible any cognitive friction within the LLM. I want to try to think about how I want the LLM to think. And that's a bit of a misnomer because LLMs don't really think. They just give statistical predictions about what is likely to come next given the things that came before. And that's why the order of how you declare things is, I think, important. So I start here with organism not found exception, then I go to organism repository, I declare it to be an interface. And here's something interesting from a language perspective. I've declared organism not found exception as an unchecked exception. But then in my description of the interface, I've told the LLM which methods should throw this organism not found exception. If you know about Java, that means nothing to Java. Java's not going to be able to do anything with that because the interface specification will not say anything about unchecked exceptions that are expected to be thrown. But I wanted to say it in my specification of the interface so that I have consistency between the concrete implementations of this interface that will come later. Right now, I only have this one in-memory organism repository. And you can see here, I say very little about it because I'm trusting most of its specification to come from this organism repository bit interface above it. Then I have the factory. Another thing to note here is the organism repository factory, I specify this configuration annotation, which is all about Spring. And normally you would think, okay, if it's about Spring, do I really want it in the context? As you've seen me wrestle with time and time again, I have accepted that my context documents, for them to work well, are going to have to know something about the technology that I'm using. So I know that I'm using Spring Boot, and you'll see in a few places I lean into that description, again, to lower that cognitive friction so that the LLMs know exactly what I want them to generate. So this organism repository factory has got a configuration. It tells it why. And I then go on to the controller. And again, here's another annotation from Spring Boot where I tell it to auto-wire in the repository. If you watched the last video, you'll know that that's where the last video ended because I hadn't auto-wired in the repository, so my server wasn't starting at all. Here's an interesting point that, well, two interesting points. One, here on these endpoints, I have get organism repo list, but in my repo specification, I have get all organism IDs. I don't have get all organisms. As it turns out, you can see from this organism controller here, oh, that's not where I wanted you to go. Let's see, can I just, whatever. Over here, organism controller. You can see get all organism IDs. You can see that it kind of ignored what I said here about the list returning the organisms, and it said, okay, we're not going to return organisms, we're going to return the list of string, which is going to be the IDs. So the LLM fixed the inconsistency between my repository specification and my controller specification, or my specification of my endpoints, and decided to favor what I had described earlier in the context with respect to the repo. I thought that was interesting. I really wanted to highlight it, so I left it in here. I'm going to fix it, though, as soon as I finish this story time. Also, originally, this came from me going back and forth between the Copilot and Claude and looking at my code, but I initially just had my endpoints without necessarily the get, delete, and post HTTP methods. But after I saw that it had implemented, that the LLM had implemented delete and post, I decided to lean into that. Haven't used them all. That's where we're going to get to on our next live coding experience. I think that hits the major things I wanted to say about this story time. And again, I didn't want to spend too much time here. I'll real quick show you that it does indeed build successful, and it does indeed start up. This is interesting. Before, when my path was incorrect, it was totally going with Gradle, I guess, but it started. Here we go. And now I got rid of the Hello World controller, so all I can do is show that it started up. I don't really have anything to hit. Again, that's what we're going to do first with our next live coding experience. Okay, second, the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the roadmap. Actually, 13 minutes. Let's talk about the roadmap now. Get out of this, shrink that, and go over here to my README document where I want to put some of my roadmap. Testing, contributing, let's do it right here. Roadmap. The next few things we are going to work on. What is the markdown syntax for an ordered list? Okay, well, that's easy. One, I would create some seed organisms for use in visual representation and early experimentation. To make sure all of the input and output for the endpoints is in JSON. 3, get a rudimentary experiment running. Make the visual representation Start building a pretty UI. I have to say, this whole UI thing is where my emotions start getting built up because I don't know much about UI technology. I've been primarily a back-end Java developer for most of my career, and so doing things in the UI is kind of difficult. But the whole point of this exercise, the main point of this exercise, is using AI to learn more. So I've decided that I'm going to use React for the UI because I don't really know a whole lot about it and I don't have a whole lot of experience in it. So it's the perfect thing for me to learn out in the open with all of you kind people watching me. Save this. Oh, I did all of this in my master branch on Git, which is bad, bad, bad. But that's the way I did it accidentally. So before I start up the new video, I'm going to get all of this committed up to the repo and start a new branch. And then we'll be back here to start in on the roadmap. Thank you all for your time.